the Drive for Five very much alive as Notre Dame wins its 5th consecutive game going into its final open date weekend inside of a soggy Notre Dame stadium where the rain continues to come down as we've crossed over from midnight into Sunday morning. Again, Notre Dame 34, USC 24, a significant victory in the micro sense for Notre Dame, a massive victory in the macro sense. I am John Brice of FootballScoop and Irish Illustrated. He is Drew Mentock, our producer, Tom Zwiller, and this is Irish Illustrated's Overtime Live. Drew, your initial thoughts on Notre Dame's 5th consecutive win, Notre Dame's 3rd consecutive win against USC, and a triumph that keeps the nationally ranked Irish very much alive to keep handling business and have a shot at the college football playoff.
I think that's exactly it. This is the biggest game they had left on their schedule. USC was looking really good, especially after that dominant win over Michigan last week. And for Notre Dame to come in and kind of keep their playoff hopes alive, there's a lot of chaos today again in college football. And I think this really kind of keeps them in there. Sports line on 24/7 Sports said if Notre Dame won this game, they have a 53% chance of making the college football playoffs. They're favored by, according to ESPN, they have an 81% chance at worst in each of their games going forward. Most of those games are 95%. So I guess Pitt and Navy are the toughest matches going forward. So getting through this game, a very dangerous team, probably the best quarterback, or Jaden Mayavi was playing better than any other quarterback in the country coming into this game. And I know he threw for a lot of yards, but he threw for about 52% through 2 picks. All that stuff is huge, and Notre Dame got what it needed to out of this game.
Thanks to all those already commenting. I love that. Love seeing the interaction with us here in the wee hours of Sunday morning. Sunday morning victory coming down for the Irish, who, again, improved to 5-2. They'll get a bye week. They get historic record-setting performances, both in the individual sense from Jeremiah Love and the tandem sense that Love and Jadarian Price combined for 474 yards from scrimmage. 474. Jadarian Price technically only credited with a 100-yard kickoff return. It was 102 or 103 for sure. He caught it a couple of steps into the end zone and brought it out. But just a massive day for the Irish, a massive moment in time to keep their season alive. I see some questions there and some great information from James Womack, a regular. We appreciate you, DL Call. Well, I know you were just asking about the scuffle at the end of the game. Notre Dame players were returning to this north end of the field to prepare to sing the alma mater, but they were not going by the USC sideline without letting USC know they were going to sing a victorious alma mater. A pretty good scuffle broke out. You had a bunch of people from both sides trying to separate it. You had some officials, some law enforcement people also wading into the middle of it. No significant blows thrown or anything like that. A lot of tempers, a lot of testosterone, a lot of chirping, but not any punches or helmets swung or anything like that. But an emotional game, and we heard Marcus Freeman say it after the fact, Drew. He was asked, he looked locked in the tunnel. He was bobbing his head a little bit. He was asked if this game meant more. And I thought it was very refreshing, Drew, to hear Marcus Freeman say, yeah, you know what, it does. Rivalry games mean more now. They mean more later in life. And Marcus Freeman was very candid in saying this game absolutely meant more, especially when there's optimism to keep the Notre Dame USC rivalry alive. But it may take a year break. It may not be quite exactly like it's been. It may never be mid-October and the Saturday after Thanksgiving out in LA again, Drew.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And this game did feel different than maybe like Notre Dame USC has always been a big deal, and it's historic. And you see the pictures of Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth popping up on Twitter when this game comes up. But I feel like given some of the tension with will they or won't they continue it, Chad Bowden going to USC, just some of the different things like that. This felt like there's a lot more tension than even in other USC Notre Dame games I've covered in the past. And I think you really felt that. And I think, as Drake Bowen said, earlier in the week, like there was emotion in this game. And I think you really saw how Notre Dame played with that. And that was, I think, a big factor for them. Like they gave up a lot of big plays, but then they made a lot of game-changing plays as well. And I think that was the difference.
And look, we've sort of paraphrased what Marcus Freeman said, and if the transcript comes through before we're done, I'll read exactly his answer to the quote because, I did find it very poignant. But I do want to read you what Jeremiah Love said about the rivalry because he did talk about how important it is and that You can say it's just another game, but he said, obviously, it means a lot. Obviously, the rivalry between USC and Notre Dame has been going on for a very long time. I feel very honored and blessed to be part of that and to have a great performance like I did tonight. And then a very low-key dagger, but a dagger nonetheless. He finished that sentence and said, and to further up the record for Notre Dame against USC. So a very eloquent response from Jeremiah Love, but also a very pointed response. And he earned the right, Drew, to say whatever the hell he wanted to after that performance.
Yes, that is according to Notre Dame, that is the most rushing yards inside Notre Dame Stadium ever, 228 yards. He also had 37 receiving yards. That's 265 yards total. I also wrote about and thought it was very fitting that this is the 20th anniversary game from the Bush Push. Reggie's obviously remembered for what he did to get Matt Leinart in the end zone in that game, but he also had 195 yards and 3 touchdowns. So for Jeremiah Love, who's compared to Reggie Bush by Marcus Freeman, Mel Kiper Jr., even his private trainer who I've interviewed in the season, for him to kind of come in here, maybe he didn't get the scores, but he still exceeded that by 70 yards and had a big gain after big game and did it in short yardage as well, which is something I think everyone really wanted to see out of him, not trying just get 2 yards when you needed 2 yards. And he did it kind of everywhere tonight. And other than one dropper, or I think his game was pretty much perfect this evening.
Yeah, and we'll certainly drill down on this a little bit more, but I do want to really hone in on the fact that this was an O-line, D-line game. It had to be, especially as the game wore on and the rain intensified. But Notre Dame, with more than 300 rushing yards, with a first-time starting center, a redshirt sophomore who only played really mop-up duty before. I won't call it garbage time. We know Marcus Freeman doesn't like that phrase, but had really only played mop-up late-game duty before and forced into some action last week against NC State. That game well decided by the time Joe Otting had to play. But again, the Irish rushed for 306 yards. They limit USC to less than 70 yards. And Marcus Freeman said point blank when we asked him about it post-game, he said, yeah, we had to make them one-dimensional. They've been beating everybody because they've been able to run at will and throw at will, and we were not going to let that happen. And this is for this season, I think this win, Drew, is the most evidentiary moment for Notre Dame being an O-line and D-line driven program.
Yes, going back to Joe Otting, I was sitting next to Tim O'Malley during the game, and we were watching him on those first few Jeremiah Love runs, and he had whoever he was blocking locked up every time. Like, I think you watched him for the first two series, and then you're like, oh, I don't need to focus on him anymore. Like, it was quite impressive. They weren't asking him to do maybe as much as they would Ashton Craig based on what I saw in terms of pulling and getting out in space potentially a little bit, but he had his man bodied up and he was getting pushed consistently. And that was not something I personally expected to see, kind of given how he looked last week a little bit. And just given the situation he's coming into.
Trent McNear, a great point by you about the trash talk in the game. I'll go ahead and read you another quote from Jeremiah Love. I wish we had the audio, but the quote is pretty good. I won't do it justice, but he was asked, I think by Tyler James, about the trash talk and what kind of conversations were going on. And this is his direct quote. They weren't good conversations. They weren't good conversations at all, is all I can tell you. I'm a competitor, man. They're competitors too. When people got some big egos and get together, at least there were no penalties and no fights. So there you go. There was absolutely no love lost between these two teams. Both teams had a significant amount of big picture equity riding on the line in this game. USC has a couple of additional opportunity games, as I like to call them, on their schedule, because I think they've still got Oregon. They've still got some quality Big Ten foes. But again, this was a very important game for Notre Dame here in the present tense, because they needed this fifth straight win. It's a big win, big picture, because the series has some uncertainty about it. Clint Novak, a good point there. I know one of you commented that you thought this was a Chris Ash game and he had answers all game long. I would contend he made good adjustments. Notre Dame did not have answers early in the game, which is why USC took the ball and immediately marched downfield and scored a touchdown and found a lot of success early. They were getting Notre Dame out of position. There were a couple of different times where it appeared Notre Dame only had 10 men on the field, including the big long completion down the right sideline going toward the north end zone on the opening possession of the game. But Notre Dame made great adjustments. And again, it just absolutely stonewalled USC on both lines of scrimmage.
Yes, I think that's some of the things we didn't see, for instance, against Texas A&M, where they did look confused. I mean, as you mentioned, we saw earlier on, Brice Young came in for a third down play, got to the line of scrimmage and looked back at the sideline with his hands up like this. And I think they only had 2 linemen with their hands down when the play started. Dallas Golden was out of position pretty frequently, and including on one of the third down stops they had early. If Jaden Mayave would have looked to his left instead of his right and where he threw it into double coverage, they probably would have converted there. So early on, it looked pretty chaotic. I know, I think Don Schuler addressed like the tempo and stuff had them kind of thrown off a little bit. So that's the type of thing we used to see from Al Golden, though, too. Maybe not looking quite that befuddled on the field, but he made those adjustments quickly, often not even waiting to halftime. And you saw that from Chris Ash. And again, this isn't holding this offense to 24 points is pretty significant. And I mean, they were coming into this game leading the nation with 8.3 yards per play. Notre Dame held them to 5.3. That's the lowest in the season. They hadn't been held to under, I think, 460 yards. They're under 400 today. Notre Dame, for what this offense is capable of, and I know it was maybe not the most ideal conditions, Notre Dame definitely made significant strides tonight.
And of note, at one point in the first half, I think that USC had about a 17.5 to 12.5 minute edge in time of possession, and instead Notre Dame finishes the game with a 5-minute, 20-second edge in time of possession, which just lets you know over the balance of the contest, especially in the third and fourth quarters, Notre Dame's offense stayed on the field. Notre Dame's defense got USC's offense off the field, forced it to kick field goals, played well in the red zone overall. Notre Dame's got to fix its red zone inefficiencies, only 4 for 7 scoring. I think they were 5 for 8 last week, but a lot of good things. I know one of you asked about the recruits' reaction, and certainly Eric Thomas and Brian Alt will be all over that. What I would tell you is I did watch them. I noticed to watch them after the game, and a lot of those official visitors were in the north end zone watching Notre Dame, seeing the alma mater, watching the celebration, watching what ended up being a great atmosphere despite the weather. Essentially a completely packed house. I know there's some tickets floating around, and if you looked hard enough, you could see some empty seats. But this was a great atmosphere despite the inclement weather. And Notre Dame put its best foot forward for those potential future Irish players, and it put its best foot forward here in the right here. And now, Drew, you've done such a great job of chronicling how Jeremiah Love has gotten to this point. And I know one of our viewers asked, what does this do for Jeremiah Love's Heisman Trophy odds? Does this vault him up? I think it absolutely vaults him up. This was the NBC primetime game. This is a prime intersectional rivalry. USC is still a very strong national brand, and Jeremiah Love just delivered a record-setting performance in a season-saving win for Notre Dame. I think you have to consider Jeremiah Love in the top 5. Ty Simpson had another great performance tonight for Alabama, and the Tide rolled Tennessee 37-20. Ty Simpson seems to be trending with a lot of popular buzz about surging up the Heisman boards. But what do you think, Drew? I feel like Jeremiah Love, absolutely, James Womack has to help him in the Heisman conversation.
Yes, I mean, it's hard for running backs to win the Heisman in the modern era. Only 3 have done it this century, so it's not something that's very easy to do. But I mean, I crunched the numbers too. I think he's up to 955 yards from scrimmage now, 12 touchdowns, which coming into today, that would have tied him for the lead nationally on total touchdowns. So he's putting up those numbers that are kind of getting him in those type of conversations. I think those first 2 games, especially the first game against Miami, kind of maybe hurt that perception slightly, but you saw the different ways he kind of got things done. And again, it's hard for running backs to win the Heisman. It's such a quarterback award. More recently, or you have to do something historic like Travis Hunter did. But I think he's justifying the fact that he had the best odds among running backs coming into the season with a performance like today. And it's just, I mean, it was incredibly efficient. I mean, he averaged 9.5 yards per carry. Like that's the type of numbers you were kind of thinking he might be able to do. And he did it against a top 20 team too. So as you said, this is a game everyone was watching, people were paying attention to, even though this was a pretty big college football day with a bunch of top 25 matchups. This is still like Notre Dame USC. People were tuning in regardless of what other games were going on.
We teased it. I don't know if it's good YouTube video, or I don't know if it's good podcast audio, but we teased if the Marcus Freeman transcript came through in time, we would read you his answer, because I thought it was a really insightful answer. And it was Marcus Freeman peeling back a little bit more authenticity in the post-game press conference. So the question was, pregame tunnel, you looked especially locked in, even saw you bobbing your head a little bit. To get this win when there's not necessarily another one on the schedule right now against this team, what does it mean to you? And he said, I told the guys, and I reminded myself, you remember rivalry games. I remember my rivalry games from Pee Wee to high school to college, and the ones I've been a part of as a coach. Those are games that mean more. You remember, obviously, the outcomes, but obviously remember some things you did in that game that led to the outcome. And so they mean just a little bit more because of what it represents for the university, what it represents for your fans, the players before us, and the players to come. And I reminded our guys of the responsibility we have to go perform the way we did. Drew, you were busy working, so that may be the first time you're hearing that quote in its entirety, but just your thoughts to Marcus Freeman saying, you know what? Yeah, it did. Damn it. It meant some more to beat USC.
Yeah. And I mean, as you referenced in instant analysis before, like there's a little bit of, bad blood here. Not bad, but maybe that's too strong of a word, but there's So I think that's good. I think I mentioned the Drake Bowen stuff earlier, but he talked about how this defense in particular didn't play with swagger in the first 2 weeks. They didn't let that emotion come out. And we really saw how much that has improved his game in particular. Like the story I wrote on him on Friday referenced like how much better he's gotten just in pass coverage. He was the liability. Obviously, everyone's going to remember the Texas A&M game-winning touchdown he gave up. But he had 2 pass breakups today, one of which was on 4th and 2 or 3 deep in Notre Dame territory. I think playing with that emotion carries a lot of weight and not running from it. Obviously, Notre Dame still needs to ignore the outside noise or the rat poison or whatever however you want to call it. Like that's something they have to stay away from. But internally, knowing this is a big deal and kind of using that to fuel you, as long as you don't get carried away with it, I think that's pretty significant for the team. And really, like Notre Dame is going to give up big plays, but they need to make big plays to match that. And they did that tonight.
Yeah, and a couple more comments. First of all, thanks for the kind words about Drew and me being your evening listening. And thanks, TG. Tell all your friends. And if they don't want to watch us live because it's so late, I don't blame them, but they can download the podcast tomorrow. And then the question or the comment about Christian Gray, you're right. We have to absolutely discuss Christian Gray. We have to discuss the resiliency, and we have to discuss the reality. And the reality was he had some really bad moments. But he had really bad moments a year ago, and he helped seal the win. And he had really bad moments tonight, and he helped seal the win. And you're right, he had multiple penalties, and he had some busts. Again, some of those worst busts were earlier in the game. I'm also curious. I noticed this live. I talked about it with Pete Sampson. I'll be curious on the rewatch and whenever we next visit with Marcus Freeman and some Notre Dame players. Was Christian Gray hurt? I thought he was pulling up or favoring his quad a little bit later in the game. I did not think he was able to run and accelerate. I saw him give up on a play that ended up a big pass, I think, to Jacoby Lane going toward the south end zone there in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, USC had a harebrained decision on the very next play and gave it away with some gadgetry that was just ill-advised and stupid, but to Notre Dame's benefit. But I also want to note this about Christian Gray. For all of the bad, he had 6 tackles, he had a TFL, he had an INT, he broke up 2 passes, and he forced a fumble. So we don't have a plus minus in basketball, and I don't always understand the plus minus in the basketball world. But I think at the end of the day, you probably consider Christian Gray had a net positive, a net plus in this game. It maybe was close. Thank you, GFS. I'm glad to know I'm not losing my mind, but I tried to watch it very intently. But I do think Christian Gray ultimately had a positive plus minus in this game, if you want to call it that.
I agree with that. I think he had 3 pass interferences, at least when he had the interception. I don't believe he had any more after that. And I think even some of those weren't as egregious as they were last year's USC game. I mean, there was that one kind of near the end zone. I thought that could have been offensive pass interference either way. I think it should have been no call probably. So I think those are the type of aggressive penalties that Marcus Freeman has talked about in the past that he can live with. Like, that's okay. They're not a selfish or whatever penalty. I forget the other word he used. So I don't think they're that bad by comparison. And I agree. He made some plays. He also on the strip Schuler had, and then KVA recovered that fumble. That play was partially made because Christian Gray didn't bite on the fake. He stayed with his man and the play wasn't open. So there's even other things that he did that maybe don't show up on the stat sheet that were really significant in that game. So I think overall he was a net positive. It probably just looked a little worse because there were some of those younger players leaving big holes. And I mean, those pass interferences do stick out, but I just don't think they were that egregious compared to some of the other ones. Like, he was just a little too handsy, but it's okay to be aggressive.
Yeah, I know someone just commented there. They feel like this is a real turning point for the defense in the season. Maybe McCarthy was the last. I don't know. These are scrolling. Yeah, Tim McCarthy. Thank you. Thanks for the comment. I think they've been turning points for Notre Dame. I think the last 5 weeks have been turning points for Notre Dame because, once again, the Irish are in a boat where any loss is capsizing the vessel, and they've found a way to, with a redshirt freshman quarterback, with injuries mounting, with new guys stepping up, new guys in the program for the first time ever, they're finding ways to win. They're winning convincingly. They had won their last few games, their last 4, like 176 to whatever it was, 63 or something. It was a huge average margin of victory the last 4. Of note, this is another double-digit victory for Notre Dame. So anytime you're stacking double-digit wins, as ugly as some of the moments were tonight, I think that's significant. I know one of you wanted us to discuss the penalties. I think that's fair. In full disclosure, I have friends not in the ACC. I have friends who officiate college football. I know how difficult it is, but I'm also not going to back down from the fact that I think we need more transparency and more accountability from the officials in these games. I did think they got a little flag happy with this contest for USC to have 1 penalty for 5 yards, Notre Dame 8 for 96. I thought specifically on Notre Dame's missed PAT that USC might have been offsides. There were a couple other moments I thought the Trojans were either timing it just perfectly or might have been offsides. You're most pleased that the officiating didn't truly dictate the outcome of this game, but 8 penalties for 96 yards. I think they had double-digit penalties for right at 111 yards or 112 yards last week. That's really not what Marcus Freeman has had. And there we go. Tom Zwiller, our ace producer. The guy's never on camera, but he's the hero to this show, noting Notre Dame's got a 129 plus 129 point differential in this 5-game winning streak. You can do the math because I don't really want to, but that's like 26 points a game, I think. So that's pretty strong. That's handling the business in front of you. But Drew, your thoughts on officiating? I'm going to continue to be vocal in any small platform and voice that I have that we need more accountability from the officials, because I think it's important. There's never been more money. We're hearing talk about private equity funding the Big Ten and being in the billions of dollars. Players are making 6 figures. Some players are making 7 figures. All the head coaches of major college football are making multiple 7 figures. We need some more transparency in a key element of the game.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I mean, I'm not an expert on officiating. I think what bothered me, especially on some of the pass interference calls, is that they weren't coming from the 2 closest refs in a lot of situations. It was coming from an official who was 30 yards away. And the guys who were right there, who even had a pretty good angle, like the one I referenced earlier on Christian Gray, there was a guy right there, maybe 3 or 4 feet away, who didn't throw the flag and would have had an even better angle at where their hands were kind of grabbing each other. Yeah. If he's not throwing that, then why is it coming from so far away? And it's somebody who maybe and I'm not sure on what the whole overall protocol is with officiating, but when I see that, it kind of scratches my head a little bit. Why do you think you have the angle to make that call when others closer didn't?
Yeah, I would say, now I'm not speaking specific to the play you're talking about. I want to see the entire game video again and then go from there. But I would say sometimes the back judge has the view, Drew, for that inside arm that the side judge cannot see. Sometimes when that defender is running with his right arm in lockstep to the receiver's left hip and left arm, The side judge can't see that because they're in lockstep, and the back judge is looking dead on. He might see them impeding the receiver. He might see them pulling the arm down, arm barring him, as it's called. So we don't know that. And I thought, again, there were a couple of ticky-tack penalties in this game. Fortunately, there will be teach tape for Notre Dame, and the best kind of teach tape. The best teach tape is when you win, you beat a rival by double digits, and we played pretty darn well, and we still have a lot to work on. I do want to note, someone asked about Jaden Greathouse. He's coming back from a hamstring quad injury. I completely get why you don't want him risking it on this wet track, especially field conditions. The field drained well, new turf this year, but Notre Dame still being judicious with Jaden Greathouse because it is a lingering quad injury. And for a wide receiver, you want him healthy. You especially want him healthy now that you got through this game. You get an open date, and you get to November with everything on the line. If you're 10-2, you're going to be in the playoffs. I think you'll have a chance to host a playoff game if you continue to be winning every week, and people are getting beat up and losing every week. And we saw it again today, some more teams. I know someone asked, does Texas A&M struggling with Arkansas help Notre Dame at all? I don't think it does. It's another win for A&M. A&M is going to always have the head-to-head matchup this year with Notre Dame. That's going to be significant. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Miami lost. You either want Miami to lose 2 or 3 more times, or you want Miami not to lose again. Yeah, thanks, Clint. I appreciate that. CJ Carr, Deglin, I think that it was a little bit of both. I think he has such confidence that he believes he can make every play that sometimes that bites him. And we've heard Marcus Freeman say it, like, shoot, CJ thinks he can make every throw. We have to rein him in a little bit. He's still growing. This was still just start number 7. This was first time he's ever started in a driving monsoon like what we had for most of the game. This is the first time he's played in one of college football's greatest rivalries and all of those things. Again, you learn from this. What's the prism for grading CJ Carr? He's upped his own prism a little bit because of how darn well he's played. He was still 16 for 26 for $136, a touchdown passing, 1 interception. He ran a touchdown in. He was smart. He's growing. He's learning. But again, that's where I stand on some of those things. That's where I stand on Jaden Greathouse. You be smart with him. And I don't think A&M struggling with Arkansas really helps Notre Dame. You don't want to be at the end of the year with Texas A&M 10-2, Miami 10-2, and Notre Dame 10-2, and Texas A&M and Miami not playing potentially in conference championships. You don't want that because, again, I just did the mock CFP selection. Head-to-head is an extremely weighted component. It's going to continue to be even more weighted this year. So you want those teams to either be 3 or 4 loss teams or 1 or 0 loss teams. And I don't think either. I don't think Texas A&M is finishing the season undefeated. I think it's flawed. I will tell you right now, if Notre Dame and Texas A&M rematched, I would pick Notre Dame again. But that's just sort of my thoughts there. Drew, I would like to hear yours. I apologize for not giving you more airtime.
No, you're good. I agree. I think CJ, it was a combination of nerds. I mean, I think even just going back to he started the game 2 for 5 for 15 yards. I think those 3 passes he missed were all open throws that he makes typically, and that kind of got Notre Dame off to a little bit of a slow start after their first drive, which, I mean, Jeremiah Love carried. So I think you did see some of those nerves, but we know that game was going to happen. As you mentioned, like, he's still a first-time starter. This is a big game, and I guess it's fortunate for Notre Dame that this happened when you had arguably, I mean, I think maybe statistically the running backs have combined for 6 touchdowns in the past games, but to do it against USC, to have 474 all-purpose yards combined, like, you had the other teammates step up, and obviously USC, I'm going to have to go back and watch it, but they weren't doing much to really slow down Love and Brice. Or were they doing more to confuse CJ Carr, just to make him having to do those short throws, stuff like that? So I'm kind of curious on what they did to impact him in a way that clearly didn't stop arguably Notre Dame's 2 best players.
And some other people of note, or some other programs, teams of note, near Notre Dame in the rankings did lose this weekend. Utah lost late tonight to BYU. BYU remains undefeated. That's Utah's second loss. Again, the Big 12 trending more and more toward a one playoff team league, I believe. Texas Tech probably still the best team. BYU has some more difficult games upcoming. Alabama cruises Tennessee with a second loss, and this one was in blowout fashion. Tennessee is right there, relatively near Notre Dame in the rankings, rated a little bit higher. The Vols were 11th this week. So, again, they're going to drop behind Notre Dame, and they still have a game against Oklahoma. They've still got a game at Florida. Oregon bounced back in a big way, but again, number 7 Texas Tech with the loss. I don't think they'll drop below Notre Dame, but that's a loss for somebody above. LSU lost. LSU is not done losing. Anyone who watches this show regularly knows I talk openly about that. It's not just when a team loses, it's when you can look at their schedule and say they're not done losing. There's considerable unrest down on the bayou around Brian Kelly's program. My boss at FootballScoop lives in Baton Rouge. He called me Friday and said, JB, I got to tell you, folks down here are really upset that LSU is even an underdog to Vanderbilt. If they lose, it's going to really get uncomfortable. Well, they lost. Vanderbilt really controlled that game, the majority of the contest. And that's, again, LSU is not done losing. That's a bit of an elimination game for them. USC now with this loss faces zero margin of error. Oklahoma got a nice road win to maintain itself as a one-loss team. That's not the best news in the world for Notre Dame. Missouri very lucky to get a win at Auburn in overtime. Virginia just escaping a very mediocre Washington State team, 22-20, having to rally from down 20-10. And Texas just beating Kentucky 16-13 in overtime. I want to note this, like Texas only had about 179 yards of total offense. Again, your preseason number 1 team, 179 yards of total offense in a game that went to overtime. They were fortunate to kick a field goal in overtime to win that contest, and that's a Kentucky team that hasn't won an SEC game in over a year, now has a 9-game losing streak. So a lot of good if you're studying the teams that are adjacent to Notre Dame in the rankings. There was a lot of adjacent good for Notre Dame in addition to Notre Dame handling its business. Drew, your final thoughts?
Yeah, and I think Notre Dame, they're coming up to a bye. There's going to be more teams like potentially favorable matchups. So you have Ole Miss playing Oklahoma next weekend. Who can tune into that? Like, there's going to be whoever loses, that's good for Notre Dame. Texas A&M plays LSU. Obviously, if A&M beats LSU, that's good for Notre Dame's strength of the schedule and definitely knocks LSU out of any playoff conversation. So there's going to be some more matchups to tune into, and a lot of those teams are playing each other and kind of beating up on each other too, where now Notre Dame just has that favorable schedule going forward. Really, I mean, Navy is playing well, but even when Navy comes to Notre Dame ranked, or when they face each other ranked, Notre Dame usually gets the better of them. Really only if Pitt, especially if they have their quarterback problems from earlier in the year solved, that could be a tougher game than maybe we thought it was a few weeks ago. But other than that, Notre Dame is definitely in the driver's seat. And I think they just need to keep playing well in those games too. I mean, it's significant tonight that once again they covered. We've seen these pretty high spreads over the last few weeks where they're 22, 23 point favorites or what have you. Tonight, 9.5. Everyone was talking about how crazy that was. Well, they covered that. So doing that, beating those expectations, I think is going to help in the minds of the voters, or the people who determine the seedings, even if they're not looking at spread specifically. Like, getting those significant margin wins, I think does give you some style points that is going to be in Notre Dame's favor, especially since those 2 losses are by a combined 4 points, 2 teams that I still expect Miami to be ranked in the top 10 or relatively around there. So those are still at this point really good losses, and then they're beating everybody by what you'd expect a top team to beat them by.
Yeah, and a few people have asked about Billy Schrauth, so we'll wrap it up with that. Marcus Freeman was asked about Billy Schrauth and if he had any idea. Bobby S. Marcus said he didn't really know what it was. He said he showed a lot of toughness to get back in there after having to leave, and then he left again. Marcus mentioned that it might be a contusion, so you hope that it's not a ligament, that maybe it is like a bone bruise or something that has a couple of weeks for him to heal. But once again, the jeweled shillelagh, I think it's called, stays in the Goog. It remains in Notre Dame's trophy case. It's now well beyond 1,000 days since USC won a game in this rivalry in order to possess that signature trophy. That's going to do it for this week's Irish Illustrated Overtime Live. For Drew Mentock of Irish Illustrated, for our elite producer, Tom Zwiller, I'm John Brice of both FootballScoop and Irish Illustrated. We're going to sign off now because I think my Uber driver, Emily, is waiting. I don't have my own car this week, so I've got to get out of here and I've got to get home. Everyone have a great night. Thanks to all the participants tonight for tuning in. Some great activities, some great questions. Join us again. We'll come back 2 weeks from today as Notre Dame plays Boston College. Until then, your Irish are 5-2. They're climbing in the polls and they're winning games. Thanks for tuning in. Until the next one, hope you enjoyed this one.